Hey, thanks for coming back to Faith and Fascia. Today, I want to talk about those health struggles that we face, the chronic pain, the trauma, the big diagnosis, whatever the giant in your health struggle right now is. I want to show you in the story of David and Goliath how David did a few things that I think no matter what you're facing, no matter what your giant is, that we can take those three things and apply them in our healing and in our fight against that giant to take it down, just like he took down Goliath. So if you're not familiar with the story of David and Goliath, it's in 1 Samuel chapter 17. The Philistines had this warrior, Goliath, and he was 9 feet 9 inches, I think is what it comes out to. That's almost 10 feet tall. He was a big man and a warrior from his youth. And he would challenge the Israelites every day, challenge them, come out, send me your greatest warrior and fight me. And the Israelites were afraid of this guy. They wouldn't. And every morning he would come out and he would make his, claim, come out, fight me. Nobody would fight him. Well, David, who was a young shepherd boy, youngest of all his brothers, was asked by his father to bring some food to his brothers. So he did. And when he got to the battlefield to bring his, these things to his brother, he heard Goliath come out and make his speech. He heard him like challenge them and, just make a mockery of God. And David was confused. Why is nobody fighting this man? And he goes to Saul, King Saul, and says, like, don't worry about it. I'll fight him. And Saul says, there's no way you can do it. You're just a boy, and he's a warrior from his youth. And David goes on to say, like, you don't understand. Like, I've killed lions and bears. Like, I'm not doing this. He's not going to disrespect our God. So Saul says, fine. And he tries to put him in his armor. David says, I can't wear this. Like, I'm not used to it. I haven't proven it. So he takes it off. He gets 5 stones from the creek, and he goes out to the battlefield with his sling and these stones in his shepherd's bag. And spoiler alert, David slings a rock. It hits Goliath in the forehead, sinks in, and he falls face down. It's absolutely an amazing story of how faith in God, simplicity, sticking with what you know can do miraculous things. It can slay giants. So I want to look at a couple of these things. I mean, David did a lot. The story's far more involved. I encourage you to go read it. Pick up a Bible, go read 1 Samuel. It's a great story. My children love it. It's a good story to tell your kids. It's fun. It's got a lot of, battles, and, the story of David's a really, really good story. So the first thing I want to point out is, again, that simplicity, right? The familiar. When we look at 1 Samuel chapter 17, verses 38 through 40, then Saul dressed David in his own tunic. He put a coat of armor on him and a bronze helmet on his head. David fastened on his sword over the tunic and tried walking around because he was not used to them. I cannot go in these, he said to Saul, because I am not used to them. So he took them off. Then he took his staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag, and with his sling in hand, approached the Philistine. That Philistine he's talking about is Goliath. This is the stone of simplicity. This is the when we're fighting our health struggle, whatever that giant is, the trauma, the chronic pain, or the diagnosis, we sometimes overlook the things that we know, the simplicity and the familiar, right? No matter what we do, no matter what our plan is, no matter what care plan or, whatever modality or treatment that you've decided on, don't forget the simple things. Don't forget the familiar things like hydration, rest, forgiveness, gratitude, just easy, gentle movement, prayer. These simple things they kind of get pushed to the side, and we forget about them because, you know, like Saul, we think we need to put on this big coat of armor, and we need to get our sword, and we need to put on the big bronze helmet. And we need to fight this thing. So we better get suited up. And while, yes, you may need to do that against some of these health struggles, right? Don't forget the familiar things. Don't, like David, I'm not used to these things, right? Like there's a lot of things we're going to do in our healing that we're not going to be used to, right? Sometimes we're pushed out of what we know out of fear or out of necessity, right? Like if you break a bone and you don't like going to the hospital, depending on that fracture, depending on that break, you may be forced to go see a doctor. You may be forced to go get the x-ray that you normally wouldn't get. Sometimes we have injuries or We may need surgery, right? I personally, I don't really like going to the hospital. I worked there long enough. I don't need to go back. But I understand that certain things require me to go to the emergency room. Certain things might require me to have surgery. There are times where you may need to take a medication or an antibiotic. So yes, there are times where we're going to be forced to do the things that we're not familiar with, right? But no matter what, we can't forget those things that we are used to, right? So even if I do need to go take the antibiotic or get the surgery or go get an x-ray, I'm not going to forget about all the natural healing things that I have. I'm not going to forget about all the homeopathies and the holistic approaches that I take. I had a gentleman who broke his wrist and he got the x-rays. Now he normally wouldn't. And he decided that he wasn't going to get the surgery. And he did all his holistic things. And he included in acupuncture and, these other alternative healings. And he did well. His bone healed and he didn't need the surgery, right? The surgeon was surprised that he, for sure you're going to need these pins and you're going to need brackets, but he was able to do it. He didn't forget about his familiar things, but he also didn't forget that, I still need to go in a couple of weeks and get that follow-up x-ray. I need to check in with the surgeon to make sure that, things are going well. But he didn't forget about all his holistic alternative treatments. He had to do them both. So the first thing we can pull away from David when we're looking at fighting our giants is to just remember the familiar, remember the simple. No matter what it is you're doing, don't forget about simple stuff, right? Taking a nap, resting, not overexerting yourself. If you take herbs, using your herbs. If you like to get out in the sun and ground, do those things, Don't think that the pain, the trauma, the diagnosis is too big, is too giant, that you can't come at it with the things that you've already done, with all the things that you're familiar with. The second thing we see from David is, again, talking about the giant and the size of some of these health struggles that we face. David didn't deny the size of Goliath. He didn't say that Goliath wasn't a giant. He didn't deny the fact that he was a massive warrior, but he declared God's supremacy over it. He had faith in God. He trusted in God. And just like how our body can feel like a battlefield, Goliath's voice, he represented that fear, right? He said, you'll never get better. The problem is too big. This is what Goliath represents in your health struggle. That giant that says, like, you can't, you come at me with sticks. What am I, a dog? Goliath mocking David. Oh, look how small you are. Surely I'll kill you and feed your carcass to the birds. But David didn't lose faith. He still had trust in God. And it says in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9, my grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Sometimes that small act of trust, that faith, showing up for the therapy, doing the stretch, resting, hydration, knowing that these things have worked for you in the past, that they will work against this thing. When somebody says, like, well, I don't know, you could try craniosacral fascial therapy. You could try craniosacral therapy. Have you thought of taking, some homeopathies or some herbs? Don't think that these simple things aren't strong enough, right? Put your faith and your trust in God and believe that he's going to lead you in a way that you can slay that giant. That shepherd's faith, right? Like, God can call you to these overlooked and unconventional healing things. And nothing is too small to matter. If you're thinking like, well, there's no way that could help this, or I've tried everything, how could that possibly work? Those overlooked and unconventional things is often where God's power shows up. That's where his strength comes in, right? In our weakness, like it said in 2 Corinthians, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. We have to get smaller so that he can get bigger, right? We have to die to ourselves so that he can rise up. We have to edify God. We have to raise him up in our healing and remember that he's the great physician. Which leads me to the number one thing that David did in his fight against Goliath, that no matter what you're doing, no matter what your treatment is, whether it's all conventional medicine, whether it's all alternative medicine, whether it's no medicine, right? And you're just going to do this thing with rest and hydration and faith. That's what it is. It's proclaiming the name of Jesus over your giant. It says in 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 45, then said David to the Philistine, "Thou comest to me with a sword and with a spear and with a shield, but I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel." David didn't rely on his strength. He didn't rely on armor. He didn't rely on size. He relied on the name of the Lord. He knew the power of God. He knew his faith in the Lord was stronger and bigger than any giant, you know? So just like in when Saul was trying to dress him in his armor, David didn't need it. David wasn't familiar with it. He knew God. He had a relationship with God, and he knew what he was good at. And that's what he used. David represents that unlikely faith-based approach that God gives us, right? That he equips us with. And sometimes through something very small, something that could just be a shift in our mindset. It could be a new modality, a new technique, or a new therapy. Willingness just to forgive, to rest, and to yield to God's plan and saying, it's out of my hands. Your will be done. Giving in and letting God take over, letting his plan work the way it's supposed to for our life. And Goliath represents that, unbeatable thing, right? The diagnosis, the physical limitation, the emotional trauma, or that long-standing pain, or whatever it is. We have to remember that we come in the name of the Lord. We come in the name of Yeshua against our giants, against our pain, against our trauma, and against any diagnosis. There is nothing too big. Nothing scares God. You understand? We have to remember to put our faith in the great physician. We have to remember to let him lead our healing, no matter what it is, whether it's surgery and antibiotics and medications, whether it's comfrey poultice, mushroom tinctures, and hot compresses. Like either end of that spectrum, remember what I told you, that the doctor standing at the foot of the bed writing orders for your therapy, for your care, is the great physician. So I want you to remember that the battle isn't yours. It's the Lord's. And you might not have a sword, but you have a stone. You may not have a title, but you have a spirit. And when faith is your aim, even the biggest giants will fall. So I encourage you to think of the giant in your life, that pain that won't ease, the emotion that just keeps resurfacing, or that diagnosis that feels just too big, like a wall that you'll never get over. And ask, what small stone has God already given me? What small stone has God put in my hand that I can fling at that giant? And when you're tempted to reach for somebody else's armor, remember that, God brings victory through what looks weak, and his strength is made known. The trust in those small steps, trust in those little things. Don't forget what you're familiar with. Don't forget what you're good at. And always, always let God lead. Raise him up. Proclaim his name over whatever giant you're facing. Trust in him, yield to him, and watch how those small stones he gives you, they'll fling with precise aim, and they're going to hit that giant square in the head, and it's going to fall face first on the dirt. All right, so I hope this blesses you, and I hope you're doing well. I appreciate you being here. And yeah, come back next week. We're going to jump into a little mini series again of looking at the armor of God. We're going to break that down piece by piece. And yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I hope you come. We'll see you soon. Bye.